Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, based on the time you are accessing this material. Welcome to week 2 Java programming course. This week, in week 2, what are we going to study? So we will start our programming lessons. Week 1, we install the Eclipse, which we'll be using as our IDE. If you have any other IDE, it's okay. But if it will be possible for you to install Eclipse, to do your best to do that, because your interface will look similar to mine. So if I'm clicking on something stuff, you know where it is. But if you are using any other IDE, it means you have to figure out where you can find that menu or that feature to use. Okay, so I believe in week 1 you were able to install your Eclipse. So what are we going to study in week 2? Week 2, we will see how you write comments in Java, how you declare variables, how you declare name constants, then the scope, the variable scope and constants. Then we'll look at data types, the integer, the Boolean, the char. Then we'll display data and perform some arithmetic. Okay, so basically this week, this is what we'll be considering. So since I've already introduced myself in week 1, then to introduce myself. If you log in onto coolchat.com, then if you need to contact me, you only need to click on chat with instructor. Now, if you don't have an account, it will tell you to log in or create an account. So you create the account. Then when you come to the page of the course, you can send me a chat message if you have any challenges, so that I can to help you out. Okay, so let's start with week 2. Send comment to a Java class. Now, why do we need a comment? Now, when you come in, you may need to document some. One, you may need to document what maybe the program is doing. Then you will need to use comments. Then 2, you may need to explain certain portion of your code, so that later on, when you yourself you are reading your code, you'll be able to understand what the code is doing. Then thirdly, maybe you work in a company and you may not be in the company, so someone else will have to work on your code. So if you add comment to your code, it will be easy for someone else to follow your code and understand. So commenting is important for you yourself, because after a couple of days, your own code, you may find it difficult to understand why you did it that way. But if you have comment to explain certain parts of your code, you easily understand that, this is how I've been doing my coding. You change your code as you gain experience, because there may be some long code that you may write, but as time goes on, your programming experience, you acquire a lot of programming experience, you may reduce some of the code that does the same task. Okay, so if you don't comment your code, even your old code, that you may have forgotten that this is how you were doing your coding at that point, and if you don't have any comment inside, you'll be wondering, you try, it take a longer time for you to figure out what the code is doing. So commenting is very important. One, for you to understand the code that you previously written. Then 2, for someone else to easily understand your code when you are no longer around and somebody else is maintaining your program or maintaining your code. Okay, so let's get started. So we have 3 types of commenting in Java. We have the line comment. So in the line comment, it's just a single line comment. We use a 2/. So you start with a double slash, then you type in your comment afterward. Then a line comment starts at the beginning line and end at the end of the line. Now, if your sentence is long and goes beyond the ending of this line, then you need to start with another slash again and continue the comment. That's why it's called line or single line comment. So if you move to a new line, then you have to start again with another slash, then you continue with your sentence for the explanation. Okay, so this is an example. I am a comment. So we have a slash. I am a comment. So you can either start a single line comment over it at the beginning, or you can start it when you end a sentence. For example, here the sentence, after the sentence ended, you can continue with your commenting by starting the slash, then a comment continues. Remember, if you begin with a comment, any other text, whether sentence or this thing you write against it, it will be viewed as a comment. So a comment, those sentences should come after a comment, but a comment can come after a sentence. When you are done with a sentence, you can start with a comment, but in the comment, you can't, when you start with a comment, you can't write a sentence because the things you'll be typing after these two slashes, they will all be viewed as comment. So if you write slash, the two slash, then system.out.println, and you write all this code here after the slash, it will be viewed as comment, so it will not be executed. Because comments are not executed, they are skipped in your code. Okay, so you can write a comment after a sentence, but you can't write a sentence after a comment. Other than the sentence will be viewed as a comment. Okay, so if you have these two slash here, then what should come next to it? It should be a comment, a text. Okay, then we also have the block comment. So the block comment enables you to write a comment in more than one line. That's why it's called block. So you can write it on one line or more than one line, so far as your comment is between your star. So a block comment starts with a slash star and ends with a star slash. So your comment should be between the two stars. So we have a slash star, then your comment will be between the two stars. Okay, so that's the block comment. So you can have your block comment on multiple lines. You can start with the block comment here, and you can end it somewhere here. So far as you have your slash star, then star slash, then all of them will be viewed as a comment. So an example is this: we have a slash star, then you write your comment inside, then you end with a star slash. Okay, then we also have the Java doc comment. So it begins with a forward slash, then two asterisks. So here we have the ends with an asterisk and a forward slash. So here we have the lesson. So these are used for documentation of the program. Then when you are using the Java doc. Okay. So basically in your code, when you're writing them, this is just for documentation, the Java doc, but if you are coding and you are explaining your code, you either use a single line comment or the block comment. Okay. Now to demonstrate, let's create a project. So this is with 2. So we can name our Java project as with 2. So we can create a new file. So new Java project. We have with 2. Okay. And finish. Then you click on finish. So you can add a class in our SRC. So you can create a main class. So yeah, you right click. So you right click on the SRC, then new, then class. Okay, so let's name our class as main. And because it will be starting when the program runs, our project runs, that's where to start. We can put a public static void main. But so you need to take, other than that, you have to write that syntax, but you need to take it since that's where the program will start. That is the first class the program starts when it runs. So you need to take the public static void main. Then you click on finish. Okay. Okay. So this is the public static void main. If you take it, if you haven't take this thing, if you haven't take it, this one will not come. So it means you need to type it yourself. So you need to type the public static void main string, then the two square bracket, then x, then bracket, then curly bracket. But if you take it when you're creating the class, this will automatically come in the code. And this your code will start running in between curly brackets in the for the public static void main. This is where you type your code. So this, you can see that it is automatically generated. This is a comment that when you create it, it's also automatically generated. But you can also write your comment as an example. So a comment can be maybe the date the update is done. So maybe at the point this video is made, it was 2nd of October 2020. So 2020. So a comment could be maybe the date the update was done. So update. Okay. So this is a, if your comment is long and it gets to this point, if it gets to this point, if you want to start a new line, then if you are using a single line comment, you need to start with another slash again. So you need to start with another slash again, then you continue your comment if you are using a single line commenting. So here maybe you write demonstration of commenting. Okay. So these are all comment examples. So this is a single line. So each of the lines, they need to be, you need to start with the two slashes for each of the single for the lines. But with the block comments, you start with a slash, then a star. Okay. Now when you write slash with a star, all the subsequent lines of code will all be viewed as a comment until you close it. So to close your comment, then you need to close it with your star slash. So your star slash close your comment for you. So in between the stars is where you type in your comment. So if you decide to use a block comment for the same maybe task, maybe update 0 to 10 2020, and maybe demonstration of commenting. Okay, so you can see that the block comment, you don't need to start the comment beginning on each of the line because it's blocked. So in between the stars, you can type as much as comment you want on each of the lines. Okay, so that's the difference between the block and the single line commenting. Okay, so we continue. So with commenting, if you run, nothing will happen because they are not code. So whenever the compiler makes a comment, it skips that comment line. So for commenting, if you run it, we don't have any syntax to run and output something. So we'll not output anything for now. So let's continue for our lectures. So using constants and variables. So we start with variable. So what are variables? Now, variables are like name memory storage to store a data on the memory. So if you are writing a code and you need to store a data somewhere, then you need to declare a variable. And in that variable, when you give it a name, you give name to the memory address so that when you get that data, you can store it over there. So in programming, you need to first of all reserve the space on the memory before you can put a data over there. So if you are using a variable name which you haven't declared yet, you get a syntax error because first you need to declare it. So declaring a variable reserves a space on the memory so that when you get the value or when you decide to put the value on the memory, then you can refer to that name memory that you've already declared. Okay. So it's just like a reservoir. If you want to go and fetch water, you first of all have to look for something that you'll be storing the water inside. Now you can't bring the water, then you'll be wondering where am I going to store it? No. So you need to reserve a space on the memory. Then when you get the input from the user or after doing the calculation and you want to store it somewhere, then you can store it in the variable that you've given it a name. Okay, so that's basically what variable is about. So like the definition says, variable is a name memory location that you can use to store a value. So if you want to store a value, the value stored could be maybe an information you get from the user. Then you want to put it there, then later on manipulate it. Or if a value that maybe you do calculation, you yourself in the program you wrote some calculation, then you want to store the result there so that later on you can manipulate or output the result. Then you also need to declare the variable. Okay, so once you declare the variable, you give the variable a name, then you specify what type of data that will be stored over there so that the computer will know how much space to reserve for that information. So each of the data types and the amount of space that is reserved on the memory. Okay, so Java provides 8 primitive types of data. So we have a data type called bytes, we have short, it's a short integer, then we have int for integer, then we have long, which is long integer, then we have float, then we have double, then we have char, then we have boolean. Okay, so most often the integer values, even though you can use short and long, we normally use the int for integer. Okay, now for decimals, we normally use float and double. Now for the difference between the float and double is that the double is more precise than the float because the double has more significant figures than the float. So if you're writing an application where accuracy is very important, so that the approximation, you don't want to have much approximation, then it's better to declare your variable as double instead of a float. By the program you're writing, if accuracy is not so necessity, then you can use a float so that the memory space that will be reserved will be limited. So any of these works. So you, the programmer, you decide when you are using the input you will be storing on the memory is going to be decimal. You either use the float or double. Now, if it's going to be an integer, then you can use short, int, or long. Okay. So if the significant figure is not that much, then it's going to be int value. But if it's a long significant integer value, then you can use the long. Okay. Now we also have the char. The char is a single character like A, B, C, D, and the rest of the single characters. We refer to them as char. That's the data type. Then course. So when you're writing an application where you store a value to be true or false, then you declare that data type as double. Okay. So I believe you are okay. So in most programming, we normally use the int, float, double, char, and boolean. Okay, but if your int is going to be of a long integer significant value, then you can use the long. If it's going to be something small, then you can use the short. But most often we use the int. So declaring variables. How do you declare variable? Okay, so there are rules for declaring a variable. A variable declaration is binary reserve and name memory location includes the following. So a data type that identifies the type of data the variable will store. So you need to specify the data type of that variable because each of the data type and the amount of space that will be reserved. So when you specify the data type, it will know how much space to reserve on the memory for that information or data to be stored over there. Then we need an identifier, that is the variable's name. So you need to identify the variable. So you give it a variable name. And you have an optional assignment operator. So if you want to assign a value to the memory by name, then you can have the equal to sign, which is the assignment operator. Then at the right hand side, you specify what kind of data you want to store in that variable name. But this is optional, so you can do it later on. You can do the assignment later on. So then you have a semicolon to end your variable declaration. So there are rules for giving names to variables. Now, as a good programmer, the names you give to the variables should be relating to the type of information how the variable is going to hold. For example, if it's an age of students, then it will be wise to declare that variable name as age instead of naming it maybe Kofi, Ama, Joseph. No, if you have a variable name like Joseph, how will somebody know the kind of information that will be stored there? But if you name it age, everybody knows that, oh, okay, age of maybe people, students, will be the one that will be the information that will be stored on the memory. So when you are deciding the names to use for a variable, use names that connotes the kind of information that will be stored on the memory. Okay. So even though you have the liberty to choose your own names, make sure you choose appropriate name that reflects the kind of information that will be stored on the memory. Then variable names cannot use reserved names. So reserved names like the int we have, you can't give a variable by name int because int is a reserved name. You can't give a variable by name double because double is a reserved name. You cannot give a variable by name class because a class is a reserved name. So even if you type in the reserved name, you can see that the color changes to maybe blue. If the color change, then you should, in your ID, then you should know that that is a reserved name. So you cannot use it as a variable name because variable names colors are different from the reserved names. Okay, the reserved names are mostly colored when your ID. Then you can't have space between the letters or words when you are given the variable name. So there cannot be a space between them. Then the variable name cannot start with a number. So you cannot start a variable name with a number. You can't have 1 underscore, no. Because 1 is the one starting, the variable name will be wrong. Okay, so these are the rules that you need to follow when you are giving a variable name. So it must start with a letter. So you can't have a variable name with a 1 or 2. No, numbers cannot start. It cannot be a reserved keyword. That's what I've explained to you. And you can't have a space between the numbers or the words or the letters. Okay. So if there are words that are together, you can use the underscore to separate the two words. Okay. So underscore is also allowed as a letter, but you can't use a special characters like at and the rest. No. So you have to use letters or underscore then you can't leave a space between them. You can't start with a number. Then if there are multiple words, then you can either use an underscore to separate them, or you can use a camel way of writing where the first word character, the first letter of the first word will be small, then the second word, the first letter will be capital, so that the person can read the name, so that I know that this is for this, this variable name is for that. Okay, so when you are declaring the variable name, you first of all have to specify the data type of the variable. So if it's int, if it is double, if it is float, if it is char, or if it is Boolean, you have to specify the data type here. Then you leave a space. You can see that there's a space. So you leave a space. Then you write the variable name here. So you decide the name you are giving to the variable. But I told you that the variable name should reflect the type of information that will be stored on the memory. So if it's, for example, age, then here can be age. If it's, for example, first name, then here can be first name. If it's, for example, an address, then here can be an address. Then you have to end it with a semicolon. Okay, so this is an example. So we have int my age. So this one is a camel way of writing by separating the words. So we have two words, mine and age. So the first letter of the first word is small letter, and the second letter of the second word is capital. Then if there is a third, then there's it can also be capital to separate it from the ye that ends. So you have to separate, use a way to separate the words. So if somebody is reading your code, the person can see the differences in the words and figure out what kind of information is being stored there. So we have float salary. So this one, everybody knows that it is a salary that will be stored over there. You can have double salary. Everybody knows that it is a salary that will be stored there. So for decimal values, you can either use a float or double. But remember, if this is just an example, so you cannot in your code declare variable by the same name twice. You get a syntax error. So the name should appear only once when you are declaring a variable name. So if you declare float salary, that's it. You cannot also declare another float double salary because the names are the same. You get a syntax error that the name has already been declared. Okay, then the assignment operator, we use the equal to sign to assign the value to your variable name. So if you want to assign the value right when you are declaring, then you will declare the way the data type will come here. You leave a space, then the name of the variable, then the equal to sign is for the assignment. Then you specify the value over here. Then once you specify the value, then you can conclude your syntax with a semicolon. Okay, so with the assignment means that you are putting the value at the right hand side on the memory. You are storing that value on the memory. Okay, so what is at the right hand side should also reflect the type of data type you specify over here. For example, here we say it should be an int. So what should be here should be an integer. Okay, here we say it should be a float. So what should be here? It should be a decimal. Okay, but we know every number has 0.0. So normally with decimal, if you write the whole number, it still be accepted because we know every number has some 0.0, but we don't normally write it. So assignment could also be done after you declare your variable, like I've explained. So here, when you declare your variable, then you end it with a semicolon. You can assign the value also, just the variable name, then the equal to sign for the assignment, then the value of you want to store over there, then you end with a semicolon. Okay, so that's it for declaring variables. Then you can also as well declare the variables and at the same time assign and then in a multiple like the same data type. So you want to assign them all at once. Then you have to separate the variables by comments. So you separate them by comments until you finish, then you end with a semicolon. For example, here float, height and weight are of the same data type. So you can indicate the data type, then you can write the list of names, then all being separated by a comma. Then you end with a semicolon. Now if you want to assign the value at the point you are declaring, for example this, then the data type, then the variable name, then you assign it directly, then comma. Then if there is a second one, you write the name, then you assign the value, then comma. Then if the third one too, if you want to assign the value, then you have to have a comma here, then the name of the variable, then you assign the value to it. Okay, so you can write declare multiple variables at once by just separating them by commas. Okay, then we have a constant. For constants, once you declare a constant, you cannot change them. So if you declare a variable to be a constant, you cannot change them. But if it's not a constant, then you can assign a value to a variable anytime you want it. Okay. Now we will later on talk about how you declare a constant. But we will take examples of the things we've talked about. So in the working example, then we will also look at how we can ask the user to enter an input. Then we get the input from the user. And that's what we will also consider. And once we get the input, then we'll consider how you can output the results. Okay, so now let's take an example where we will declare maybe an integer double or the key variables that we've declared. So let's take an example. So here, let's say int age. Okay, then we have double maybe salary, then double maybe all at once height and comma weight. Okay, now if I want to declare at the point I'm assigning the value, then I can have double, then for example what is double with height, then maybe force. Okay, then maybe pressure, but force is equal to maybe 10, then maybe mass, let's say mass and acceleration. So let's say mass is equal to, let's say 20, let's say acceleration is equal to 10. Okay, then you end our syntax with a semicolon. Okay, so here we declare multiple ones. At the time we are declaring, we are assigning the values to them. That one you can also do. We just declare them without assigning the value. And here these ones are multiples ones. So multiples ones are separated by a comma. Here these ones are single ones. This one doesn't have a value yet. So later on you can assign the value. For example, if we want to assign the age to be maybe 10, then we can write age is equal to 10. Okay, so in this case 10 will be stored on the memory by name age. So we have a value of 10 on that memory by that name. So anytime we want to display the value, we can just call the variable name. For example, if I want to display the age, last week we talked about how you can display something on the screen. We said you have to write system dot out dot Okay. And last time, someone was saying that when he prints the information, maybe two information, they get stuck to each other on the same line. Remember, if you want each of the display should be in a new line, then you have to use print ln, not print. So if you want it to be on a new line, it's supposed to be print ln. If you just use print, when you have another output, it will follow the previous one the same line. If you want each output to be on the new line, it's supposed to be print ln. Okay, now you can display our thing. So this to display of the content of a variable name is just the name of your variable. So if you want to display the age value, you just write the age inside. Okay, so now let's run. So we can run our code. Okay, so you can see that the value that is stored on the memory for the age is the one which has been outputted. Okay, so that's it. So here we reserve a space by declaring the variable, and here we put a value on that space by using the assignment, the equal to sign. And remember that the value that should be at the right hand side should reflect the type of data type. We said the type of data type for this is int, so we cannot put any other data type here. It's supposed to be int. Okay, so that's it for the example. Later on we'll see more example as well. Okay, so that's how we declare our rows. Like I was saying, we also have a constant. So for constant, when you declare a value to be a constant, you cannot change the value in it. Once you declare it, when you change it, you get a syntax error. So this is an example way of declaring a variable. Constant variable declaration is similar for a constant, just like the normal way we declare variable, just that we add a keyword final to it. So with the keyword final next to it, it makes it a constant, so it does not change anymore. Okay, so these are example declaration of a constant. We have int final int number of departments is equal to 20. Okay, so later on, if you are saying the number of departments is equal to 21, you are going to get a syntax error, because once you assign a value to a constant, you cannot change it. It is not compulsory to assign a value to a constant at the time you are declaring. You can declare and later on assign the value if you wish. Okay, so we have example final double pi 3.14152. Okay, then tax rate is equal to this. So the keyword final makes it a constant. Okay, so it's the same way we declare a variable and assign a value, just that the keyword final makes it a constant. So once you use a constant, you cannot change it anymore. So for example, if I write final pi and even though you can choose the name of your constant, normally constants are written all in capital block so that it makes it different from the normal regular variable names. So for constant names, just use the capital blocks. Okay, so final double, then let's say it's equal to. So there are two ways of declaring. You can first of all declare it, then later on assign the value. So later on you can assign the value. So you can write pi is equal to, let's say, 3.142. So that's this. So later on, if you want to assign a different value to your pi, you will get a syntax error. Maybe I want to write 1 4. Great. Now you can see that there is red error here. So it says the final local variable pi may already have been assigned. So you see you cannot reassign the value once you've assigned the value to a constant. So the value of a constant does not change. You can't change it anymore. Now normally when we are writing programs that contain formulas of fixed value, then we name them as constant by using a keyword final, so that along the code it does not change. It remains the same value throughout your code. Okay, so that's an example of this. So you can declare it, then later on assign a value, or you can assign a value when you are declaring. So for example, if I say final double, let's say acceleration due to gravity, it's 9.8. Okay, so in this case I'll initialize my constant at the point I'm declaring. Okay, so that's it. So constant declaration is similar to variable declaration, except with the constant we use a keyword final, which means it's final. You can't change the value. And once you assign a value to a constant, you cannot change the value. Other than that, you get a syntax error. Okay, so we continue. Okay, now in the data type we also have, there is also a written class for multiple characters, which we call string. So if you have more than one character, for one character we use char. By more than one character, there is a class which has been written for that, which we call it string. So for a variable which has more than one character, like a name of a person, we use the string data type or string class. So for example, if I want to have a first name, I can have string okay, so string first name. Then you can assign the value. Okay. So for string, the value needs to be in the double quotation. For a char, you need to have the value need to be in a single quotation. So for the string, the S I think is supposed to be capital. Okay, so the S is capital. So for char, it's just a single character. So we can have maybe char. What can we have? Maybe gender. So maybe we use M for male, then F for, so here we can have, if gender is M, so that will be, okay, so that's it. So for more than one letter, you declare the variable as a string, with the S being capital, okay, and string values are in the double quotation. So when, of course, so you can use a single quotation, but what you start, if you start with a single quotation, you have to end with a single quotation. So what you start with is what you end with. Okay, so in Java, it's not accepting the single quotation for a string. So it means for string, you have to use all of them should be double quotation. For PHP, it doesn't matter, but for Java, all of the string listen should be in double quotation, not a single quotation. So for string, you put them in the double quotation. For char, then you can put them in single quotation for just a single character. Okay, so that's it. Okay, so that's about the variable declaration. So we continue with our lecture notes. Then we have scope of variables. So scope of variable is how the variables can be accessed. So we have global and local. Global variables are variables which are outside a curly bracket. So if you declare a variable which is outside the curly bracket, it is a global. It can be accessed in all the curly brackets that you write. The curly brackets could be in a function. So if you declare a variable outside your functions, then that they are global. You can call them in any of the functions that you've written. But if a variable will be only within a function or a curly bracket, then that variable is a local variable. So for example, if I declare a variable here outside this curly bracket, outside this function, and our function in the function in the class is called a method. We come to study that one. So this is a method. Okay, so if you declare a variable here, so let's int, let's say global int. And let's say I assign maybe a value of, let's say 20. Okay, now all the variables I've declared between these curly brackets are called local variable. I cannot access them outside that bracket. But the global variable, the one on brackets are called global. I can call this variable over here. If I want to print that value, I can write system dot out dot print len global int. Okay, now because this method is a static, then you have to call it static, then you have to qualify your value by static because it's in the static method. So yeah, we call our class public static, so you have to qualify your variable when you are calling them in the static method. So you can, that's why it's complaining. So we add static to here. So you can see that I'm able to call this variable outside my curly bracket because that one is global. You can access it anywhere. But I can't access any of these variables outside. The pi, salary, if I call them outside here, if I call them here, over here, I'm going to, let's say if I'm writing system dot, okay. Okay, so for example, if I have a different method, let's say public, it will come to learn a method, maybe int sum, let's say int A, int B, okay. So let's say if I want to use let's say we have acceleration due to that. Okay, we have mass and we have acceleration. So let's say I call this one force. Okay, so maybe I have the double. Okay, so here you done. Okay, so now let's say for example, I'm trying to use the mass that declare here. So later on, we'll look at the meaning of star in Java programming or any other programming, but to demonstrate the local and global variable, later on when we get it out, but I can even tell you what the star means. So in programming, we use star for multiplication. So we know force is equal to mass times acceleration due to gravity. So if I want to create a method to calculate the force of your body by multiplying the mass and the acceleration. Okay, now you may assume that because you declare mass here and you declare acceleration here, you can use the values over here. Okay, but remember, the one you declare here is local variable. So local means that it can only be accessed between your curly brackets here. So if you access those variable names outside the curly bracket, you are going to get syntax error like this one. You can see that it's telling me that acceleration cannot be resolved to a variable. Mass cannot be resolved to a variable because it's expecting them to declare in here because it's supposed to be a local variable. It's expecting them to be declared here or as an argument. Okay. Now let's say for example, if I have a variable called mass and acceleration, then you can see that it will be able to recognize these values because they are declared as global, so they can be accessed in any part of the curly bracket. So let's say for example I have, okay, so if I have maybe double, now I don't need a static because that method doesn't have it, it's not a static method, so I can just have double mass, let's say it's equal to 20, then comma acceleration due to gravity is equal to, let's say, 9.8. Okay. Oh, sorry. It's supposed to be just acceleration because that's what we use over here. Okay, so the method is supposed to be acceleration. That's because that's the name we are referring. Okay, so now when we check, you can see that the errors are gone. Okay, because it's saying this as a global variable we declare at the top, and it's saying the mass also as a global variable we declare at the top. So normally you can say in the IDE, in the development environment, in your IDE, if you are using Eclipse, I don't know about the other IDEs, the global variables, you can see that it changes their color to blue. But for local variables, their colors are like just a light faint black. Okay, so you can see the difference. So global variables can be accessed in all your curly bracket or in all your functions. But for local variables, you can only access them between the curly bracket, between your method. So between only this curly bracket, you can access those named variables. If you are accessing them outside, you get a syntax error because they are local variables. So that's the scope of variables. So for global variables, they are declared outside your curly brackets. So somewhere here, you declare your global variable on top of your methods. Then you can call them in any of your methods. You can refer them in any of your methods. Okay, so that's the difference between global and local variables. Then we've talked about our integer data type already. Okay, so this is just about the size in bytes. So these are the values you can have for bytes, short, integer, then long. Okay, so for bytes, you can have from -128 to 127. Then for short, you can have from -32,760 to +32,767. Okay, so and the number of bytes is size in bytes. This is 2. Int is 4. Then long is 8 bytes. Okay, so based on the size of your integer that you want to store and the ones you type it there. But normally most integers are not that long, so if you declare them as int, it will be enough, which is of this one, of this number of billions. Okay, so even if you declare an integer, the size will be big enough. Unless you want this huge size, then you can declare your integer value to be long. And most often we declare integer values as int. Then booleans are just true or false. So if you'll be storing true or false on your memory. For example, maybe if you want to write a code to check if the date or the day of that particular day is the last day of the month. So when you check and declare a variable to indicate whether it is false or true, then you can declare it as Boolean. So here, then you can assign either true or false to it. Then if maybe, for example, you are writing a game, to check if the game has ended or game has started, then you can also declare a variable by name. Then the value Boolean, the data type is Boolean. So you can assign whether game has started or not by assigning true or false inside your name variable name. Okay. Now for floating point, double or floats, I've already explained. For the double, it has huge significant figures. The number of bytes in the double is twice that of the float. So if you are going to use, you are writing maybe a financial application where accuracy is very important, where you don't need to approximate, or a slight approximation can affect subsequent values, then it's better you use double because it has huge significant figures. Okay, so that's it. Then we've taken in a number of examples. So here is this example of a char. So char, middle, initial. Okay, so char is star. So char normally is a single character. Put it in a single, in between a two single characters or quotation, single quotation. Okay. Then for string, if you have more than two or more characters, then you declare the data types as a string. So that one, you have your string and the name of your variable, then you can sign. Remember, the S is capital, like I've explained to you. So the S is capital, then you use the name. Then inside the text is supposed to be in a double quotation. Remember, it's supposed to be in a double quotation. Okay, so now finally we are on arithmetic operation. Doing calculations in your programming code. In our programmers, you write application where you need to manipulate data by doing some calculation. For example, if you are doing a financial application, you have to maybe know maybe the total sum of amount maybe a person has deposited. Maybe when it does withdrawal, it do subtraction, then you have to sum all those values and get the total balance of the person. Okay, so if you're a programmer, you make calculations along the way. So how do you do that? So for calculation, addition, we use the plus key. For multiplication, for subtraction, we use the minus key. Now, as I've explained to you already, for multiplication, we use a star key. For division, we use a slash. Then for modulus or remainder, we use the percentage. Now, a remainder or modulus is when you divide the number by a particular number, the remainder that you get is what we call the modulus. So 5 modulus 2 is 1 because 2 will go into 5 2 times, which will be 4. Then it will be left with 1. So the 5 modulus 2 is 1. So if you are writing an application to check the modulus of this, and then you can use the percentage, this percentage keyword or key. Okay, and this become handy if you want to check if a number is even or not. So if a number is even, if it's been divided by 2, you should get a remainder of 0. So if you are asked to write an application to check if a number is even or not, then you have to just find the modulus of the number which the user has entered. So you find the modulus of 2 of that number. Then if the remainder is 0, then we know that it is an even. If it is not 0, then we know that it is odd. Okay. So later on, when we get to the conditional statement, we may see this as an example. When first we calculate the modulus, then we use the conditional statement to check if the remainder is 0 or 1 or anything else. Okay. Now we are taking input from the user. We want to write an interactive application where we ask the user to enter something. Then we got the value from the user, we store it on the memory. Then later on, we can manipulate the value either by displaying what the user has entered to him on the screen, or we can do multiplication or add something to it and display on the screen. Okay, so to get input from the user, we use a scanner class. So we use a scanner class for keyboard input. So if you want to get input from the user, you need to import this class. So you need to import this class. Now once you import, you can create objects of that class. Now how do we create objects? Object of a class. To create an object of a class is just the class name. So you write the class name first, you leave a space, then just the same way we declare variable names, we will give the object a name. Okay, so you give the object a name, then equal to, then this new keyword makes it that you are creating object from this class. Okay, so this new keyword, you specify it, then you leave a space, then the same class name comes, so you can see that we have the same class name. Okay, now some classes as an input where we call the constructor. Now when we come to classes, we will explain later, but see this one, some classes as an input. For the scanner class, the input is system.in. Okay, so when you declare the object of the scanner class, in the bracket, you need to write system.in, which is the constructor of that class. Okay, so now once you created the object of the scanner class, then you can use it to get the value from the user. Okay, so in summary, to get input from the user, you need a scanner class. Now you need to create objects of that class. Now Java is object-oriented programming. There is a class which has already been created by the Java environment that you can create objects of. Then later on the course, we will also create classes of our own that we can create objects of. So class is just a blueprint where you can create several objects from it, as many as you want. They will all have the characteristics of that class, the same features of the class that you have. When you create object, the object will inherit that same features. Okay. Now to create object of a class, we use the keyword new, and the syntax is the name of the class, and you leave a space, then you give the object a name. And the same way, the same rules for naming a variable applies to the object name as well. So you give the object a name, then equal to, then you use a new keyword, then you leave a space, then the class name. Here our class that you want to get, use it for the input taken is the scanner. So you call your scanner class. Then your scanner class has an input system.in. Okay, this input we call them constructor. So that's in the later on when you come to class, we will get to know what the constructor is. But you just assume it's just an input, and the input you have to call on the scanner class is system.in. Okay, so later on you use the object to get the value from the user. So the object has a number of methods. So if you are getting a double input from the user, you know that the kind of data that you are getting from the user is a double data type. For example, you ask the user to enter salary. You know salary can be in decimals. Okay, so in that case, the method you call on the object is going to be next double. Okay, so the next double is going to return a double input that the user has entered. If it's int, then it's supposed to be next int. Okay, now if it is a string, then you use a next line or next line, okay, method. Okay, then or you can also use next. So next line or next all works for string. For double, next double, then int, next int. Okay, now you don't need to memorize these methods by heart. After writing the object, when you put a dot after the object, all these possible methods that you can call on that object will be available that you can choose from. Okay, so let's get started. Now, to use the scanner class, you need to import this class. So you write this code, import java.util.scanner in your class. So this syntax line of code is very important. It will include this class in your project because this scanner class is already written in your Java environment, but you have to indicate that you need that class, so you have to import it. So you write this keyword, import java.util.scanner. So this will import your scanner class, which you can later on call. Okay, so here in this example of my code, I can import my lesson. So import is on top, we put the import on top of your class. So your import can be here. Okay, so that's where, so your import should be on top of your class. So in this import, it will make it possible for you to use a scanner class, which you need to get input from the user. Okay, so now I can delete this previous example we've done, so we can write the new examples we tested. Okay, so let's continue then. If there is a code that we will need. So let's go to joining string. Now, sometimes you may need to join a string to make a sentence. So to join a string, we use a class. We use a class key, the class key to join two strings. So for example, if I have string first name, then I assign the value string last name. And if I want to join these two names to make a full name, then I can declare another variable, for example, string full name. Then I can join these two string, and then the result I will assign it to the memory space that I have reserved by name full name. Okay, so this plus means that join this to this. Okay, now what you should take note is that when you are joining, if you join this and this, because you don't have a space after the N and you don't have the space before the A, this will join together. So you after the N, immediately the capital A will start. So if you need to have a space in between, then you can also have another string which is a space, or after your last letter here, you can leave a space so that it will not join immediately with your A. Or you can leave a space here in your A so that it will not join. Or you can add another string to these two variables. So there will be a space between them. Okay, so that's what has been explained. So now let's do an example. So an example. So you join two string together, but here we are coding a string. So string, later on when we see example of how you use the scanner class to get the value from the result, then we can change this one to the user entering the first name and last name itself. So we have string first name, I can name it FN, then it's equal to okay. So you can also use your name, doesn't matter. Then string last name, I can use LN. It's equal to, let's say, Ashon. Okay. Now I can create another variable where I will store the combination of these two first name and last. So I can have string name is equal to FN. Now we say joining, we use plus, so plus LN. Okay, so this will join these two strings. Now I want to output my name, so I can have system dot out dot println. So I will output my name. Okay, so now I can save this and I run it. Now, like I was explaining, here we don't have space between the N, after the N, or before the A. So this will join right together. So when I run it, you will see. Okay, so as you can see, the A is right after the N, so there is no space. So if you want the space to be, then you can leave the space is also a character, so you can have the space character here by clicking on the space bar, and you can save it. So here you can see that after the N, so there is space. When you join, the space will come over there. So there will be a space before your A. Okay, so as you can see, there is a space over here. Okay, so now, or someone may also decide to put the space before the A. So just press your space bar to create that space, then you save and you run. Okay, so you can see that the space has been reserved here. Okay, so the space you put here is over here. And someone may also decide to add a string which has a space. So the person may also write a quotation which the value is then plus. Okay, so in this case, it's join an empty space string to your first name. Then the result, it will add the last name to it. So there will be a space between these two. So joining the string, we say plus. So this first plus will join the empty string to this one. Then the second plus will join the last name to it. So when you save and you run, you still get the same result. So based on how you want to manipulate your string, but you should know that when you are joining or adding string together, we use the plus. Then if you want a space to be between your strings, either you leave a space before, but if you are getting an input from the user, you cannot manipulate the user's input. So in that case, then you need to write the space over here so that the value you get from the user will be this one. The first name from the user, then the last name from the user, then the space will be between them. So in that case, you cannot manipulate the fn and the ln because you are getting them from the user. So all that you can do is to add an empty space, that there will be a space between the first name and the last name. Okay, so we continue. So in this example, we have int age is equal to 20. So to display your age is 20 years, the code below could be written. So you have system.out.println. Your age is okay. So we add the value stored in our age variable. So we have plus. Then we add another string plus. So your age is then the value stored on the memory by name age will join this one. Then after that, you have the years joining it. Then take note that after there is the s, there is a space so that when you have the age, the value will not be close to the s. So we leave a space after the s so that there will be a space after the s. Then the age comes. Then you can also take note that before the y, we leave a space so that the last value, there will be a space before this. If you don't do that and you just join there's no space here, there's no space here, you get something like this. So you get your ages. Now you can see that the 20 is close to the s and close to the y. So if you want a space to be between them, then you put the space in the quotation after your s, there will be a space. Then before your y too, there will be a space. So leave a space over there. Okay. Now we are going to write a program like this. It says write a program which has an employee name and the total hours worked in the month. The program should calculate the salary of the employee and the net income after tax is taken out. Okay, so before we write the program, let's use this example to get the input for our scanner so we can know how to use our scanner, then we can apply it in our function. Okay, so for getting input from the user, like I told you, you need to declare the variable first, which is like reserving a space on the memory. So it's like reserving a space on the memory. Okay, now we said that if you want to get something from the user, you need to declare object of your scanner class. So we have our scanner. Okay, now I can name my object to be input. Okay, then we say you use a new keyword to create object of the class. Then the class name again. Then we say that the scanner class takes the system.in as input, which is the argument. Okay, so that's it. Now we don't get error because we imported the class here. So if you write this line of code, and you don't have this import statement, you get an error. So for example, if I cut this part of my code, now you can see that it's complaining that this class is not defined because I haven't imported that class. So this import statement is very important. Once we are done with that, now we can get the value. So now you can have, first, before you tell the user to enter something, you have to display something on the screen so that the user knows that you're supposed to enter something. So we can write system.out.println. Okay, so output action. Please enter your first name. Your first name. Okay, so now that we've told the user what we expect from the user, now we can get the name. So we call fn, then we assign the value we get from the user. Now the keyword, the keyboard input we are getting from the user, you have to get that value from the object of the scanner you've created. So the object name is input. Then if you put a dot, then the methods used on the scanner object count. But string, so we have to use next line. Like I explained to you the type of function you can call. So you can call the next line function. So when you start typing, it will come. So you can either use the next or next line. So but let's use the next line. Okay. Okay. So this line of code will get the value from the user. So the object of the scanner class we've created, then dot. When you put the dot, even it will give you the option of the method you can call. If a string, you have to call next line or next, any of them. Okay. Now when you get the value the user will type, then you store the value in the memory you've created already for storing the first name inside there. Then we can do the same for last name. So we can copy and paste this and just change the value. So please, and this one will be last name. Okay, and our last name variable. So our last name variable. So we get the value, then we store it there. Okay, so now the first name we get from the user and then the last name we get from the user. We add an empty string between them so that there will be a space there. Okay, so now when we run the code, so we can run this code. Okay, so it says please enter your first name. So I can enter Godwin. Okay, then I press enter. This one says enter your last name, so I can enter Ashon. Okay, then enter. So you can see Godwin Ashon. If I like to, I can add the name is, so I can add in the system.output, I can add a string to the name variable, so I can output. So I can output maybe welcome to Java programming Godwin. So action. So welcome to Java programming. Okay. Then the person's name follows. So because I don't want the person's name to be right after the gene, you can see that I've left a space after the gene. Okay. Now we use the class sign to join this the string which is stored in this memory by the name. We join it to our text. So in the previous example, the first name is Godwin and the last name is Ashon. So the name will have a value of Godwin Ashon. So if this code will run, it will be welcome to Java programming coordination. So we can save this, then we run it. Okay, so please enter your first name. Let's say Godwin. Your last name, Ashon. Okay. Now it says welcome to Java programming coordination. So that's it about joining strings. So we use a class to join strings together for addition as well. Now when you are getting input from the user, declare a variable. Then when you declare the variable, import your scanner class by importing java.util.scanner. Create object of your scanner class. Then creating object of the class is just the class name, then the name of the object. This you can choose whatever name you want, but I have named it input. Then equal to, then the new keyword is for creating new object. So new, then the name of the class. Here the class is scanner. Then some classes take in constructor. This one takes this as a constructor, system.in. So you call it in the bracket system.in. So now once you've created the object, you can call the method for getting either double or string. So if it's double, the object dot double. If it's string, double dot next line or next. Okay. So based on the data type that you want to store the value inside, then you call the method, appropriate method on the object. Okay. So now let's continue with our example application. So in this application, it says we should ask the user to enter the name. So the user will enter the name. So we declare a variable name we call name, where we will give the instruction to the user to enter a name. So the user will enter its name over here. Okay. So in this case, if we want the name to come right after this one, then we have to use the print instead of the print line. Okay. So we have the user will type in the name over here. Then we ask the user to enter staff ID. Then the user will enter the staff ID. Then we ask the user to enter the hours work. Then the user will enter the hours work. Then we'll do calculation on the input that we've gotten. So our hourly rate is 8 cedi. So the hourly rate value is going to be 8. Our tax is 10% of the gross salary. Then we know gross salary is the multiplication of the hours work and the hourly rate. So in this case, it's going to be 2 times 8, which will be 16. Now to get the net salary, you have to calculate the tax and subtract it from the net salary. And they say tax is 10%. So this is going to be 10 over 100 times the gross salary that we've calculated. So the value of the tax you get, and you subtract it from your gross salary, then you can get your net salary. Okay, so let's start coding. So this is a description. This is an output of a number of stars. So you can also use the system.out.println, and in the double quotation, it just be a number of stars. So the next line will be a test with, there is a space there, so you can leave enough space over here and enough space over there. Then you leave, then you can copy the system.out of what this one that you've written over here so that it comes there. So let's do it step by step. So the first step, we are going to write a code to display only its parts, then we continue with the rest. So since we will need the import Java because we'll be taking input from the user, we can leave this part of our code and we can begin a new code. So here we are displaying the star. So system.out.println, a double quotation, couple of stars. So you can just write couple of stars. Okay. then you end. Then our next system is a salary calculator. Okay, so we can leave enough space here. Then salary calculator. Then space and continue. Then we close with a semicolon. Then you can just copy the one at the top. Then you can save, then we run. So this one will just display star, then below it we have meter, and this the stars as well. Okay, so that's what you can see. So we've done that part of our code here. So now we have to get name, ID, and hours from the user. So now we have to declare variables where we'll be storing this. Like I told you, you need to reserve a space on the memory before you give the instruction of the user to enter something. Then once the user enters, you store them inside. So we need to create a variable name, for ID, and the hours. Then what do you think will be the variable type, the data type for the hours? If in your programming hours can be decimals like 2.5, then you can declare your hours either float or double. But if you decide that the person approximates it to a whole number, for example 2.5, if the person can write 3, then that one you have to make it an integer. So based on how your program is working, it's how you declare it. But I would less than double so that a user can enter maybe 2.5 for hours. Okay, so here I will declare my hours as double. Now this staff ID, it can be integer because some staff ID they have letters inside. Then a name, I said integer. It should be string because some staff ID have text inside. Then a name is also string. As you know, it contains text. Okay, so that's it. So now I'm going to declare these 3 variables. Then you display the information, get the values. So I will have string name. I can, because ID and name are of the same data type, I can have comma, then ID. Okay, now I can have double hours. Okay, now gross salary and the rest are also double, so I can write gross salary, then the tax, then net salary. They are all double, so I can also declare them as well. Okay, so now I've declared all my space. So then the variable name will store the name I will get from the user. The ID will store the ID of the user. The hours will store the hours we get from the user. And when we do the gross salary calculation, we'll store it in this space. Then when we do the calculation for tax, we'll store it in this space. Then when we do the calculation for net salary, we'll also store it here so that we can later display them. Okay. So now we will do our 3 parts. Ask the user to enter the name, ask the user to enter the ID, staff ID, and ask the user to enter the hours worked. Okay, so we have system dot out dot internet. But before that, we needed to create our objects taking the inputs. So okay, so here enter your name. Okay, so before this, I need to declare the scanner object so that I can use it to get the name. So scanner inputs is equal to new scanner. Then the scanner text system.in as its argument or constructor. So now that I've asked the user to enter the name, I can get a name. So using the object for the scanner. So I will have name is equal to my scanner object. Because it's a string, I'm supposed to use nestling or nestling. Okay. Okay. So I can copy. So I can modify it for the ID and the hours. Okay. So here it will be enter your staff ID. Okay. So here staff ID to be said is a string. So it's supposed to be nestling. So I can have ID is equal to input dot nestling. Okay. Now hours work. So enter the hours work. Or enter your hours or however you want to. For hours is double, so we have hours hours. Okay, now hours, the method is next double, so you can see that it is complaining because this is for string. So since the hours is double, our method we need to call is supposed to be next double and next double. Okay, so so before we need a scanner object, we've created it, we give instruction to the user, then we get the value from on the object for the scanner. So the method we call is based on the data type we are getting. So here is a string, so we need to call the next line. Then here is also a string, we need to call the next line. Here is double, so you need to call next double. Okay, so now we've taken the input from the user. So now we can manipulate our input by doing the appropriate calculations. So now we can declare our working hours, the hourly rates as final because it's a constant. So you can, if you want, you can. It's not compulsory, but if you like, you can declare it as a constant. So final double hourly rate. Okay, hourly rate is equal to 8.0. Okay, and our tax 2. Now 10% is the same as 10 over 100, and 10 over 100 is 1. So for our tax rate 2, we can have final double tax rate. Okay, is equal to 0.1. So 10% is 10 over 100, which is 0.1. Okay, so our gross salary is going to be the hourly rate times the hours the person entered. So our hourly rate, we said multiplication is star, so our hourly rate star, then the hours the person enters, so hours. Okay, so gross salary. Okay, now our tax is going to be the tax rate times our gross salary. So our tax is going to be our tax rate times our gross salary. Okay. So in that case, our net salary, we will subtract the tax from our gross salary, and we can get our net salary. So our net salary is equal to our gross salary minus tax. Okay. So now we've done all the calculations. So now we can display our results. So in the results, we can display what were we supposed to display. Okay, so here too we have salary information. So we display. So you can copy this and change the text. So you can have this over here, the salary information. And change this one to salary information. So you can shift this one a little bit. Okay. So this one will be salary information. We can display our results. So employee working hours. Okay. So if I like, I can copy this thing. I'll add a system. I'll add a system.out to it. Okay. So here we'll have system.out.println. Okay. So here our test. This one will be the name we get from the user. So we have our hard-coded test plus the name we got from the user. Okay. So this will display the name the user entered. Then next will be the ID. We have system.out.println. Okay. So here we have staff ID. So we'll add the ID the user enters, the ID we got from the user. The value stored on that memory, the memory by name ID. Okay. And we also display the working hours we got from the user. System.out.println. We have our double quotation. And here plus the hours we got from the user. The hours we got from the user. Okay, so end that one. Then our hourly rate. Display our hourly rate too. Okay. So system.out.println. Okay. So our hourly rate times. So here the currency is also a text, so it will here. So that the string will end somewhere here. Then we'll add our value for our hourly rate. Our hourly rate. Okay. Okay. So then. Okay. So for the tax rate, we can just write it the way it is. So system.out.println. So for the tax, we can put it the way it is. Okay. Then we have our gross salary. System.out.println. dot out dot println. We have our gross salary, and that one to supposed to end here plus and plus our gross salary. Gross salary. Okay. Then we come to our tax system dot out dot println. Our tax and tax to then we join the tax over there. So followed by the last one. Okay. So here we have our system dot out dot println. Then here will be our net salary. So plus net salary. Okay. I believe we are done. So I go over, then we run our code. So we need to get input from the user. So we need to declare our scanner object. So this line of code, scanner, the name I'm giving to the object is input. And you know that the new is for the keyword. Then so the class name here will be here, the object name will be here, the keyword new, you need to have it. And our scanner takes in this input system.in, so you write it. Now our scanner class needs the import, so we need to write this before you can even declare your scanner object. So you need to import java.util.scanner before you can have your scanner input. Now to get the value is input the object name, then appropriate method. So since we are storing the value of from the keyboard into a string variable name, you have to use the next line or next. Now since this one too is a string, so you have to use the next. And the hours we are getting from the user, it is of the type double, so you have to use next double on the scanner object. Okay, now we declare this final because the hourly rate will not change and the tax rate will also not change. And the tax rate is 10%, so we've already done the 10 over 100 already, which gave us, which is 0.1. Then we have the gross salary will be the multiplication of your hourly rate times the hours worked. That will give you your gross salary. But we need to calculate the tax and subtract from the gross salary. And tax is the tax rate times the gross salary. So we have the tax rate times the gross salary. So our net salary is going to be, subtract the tax from our gross salary. So when you do this, you get the net salary. So now the rest are just display results. So just this one says salary information. So it just says system.out with a star and a text at the middle and a star. Okay. Now we have the display. So employee ID, then we join to the name we got from the user, and staff ID, we join it to the ID we got from the user, and working hours we get it from the hours we got from the user. Then the hourly rate, we join it with the hourly rate, which is a constant we have here. Then the task, since this doesn't change, you can just write the same thing as the one there in the question. Okay, so gross salary, we'll add the gross salary we calculated, which we stored on that memory. We join it to the string. Then you remember the currency is also a string, so we added it to our text, our string text. Then the tax too, we join it to our string text. So the tax will be stored on our tax name memory. We add it. Then the net salary we stored, we add it to our string. So now we can run this code. Okay, so we save and we run. So it says, please enter. Okay, so my name is Godwin. Sure. Okay. Now remember the input here. We use system.print. There was no ln because we want the name to join to be typed right after our name. So here we can even have so we can pause this. Then we can have the semicolon, a column there, so that it will separate what the person will write from the text. Here we can. Okay, so because we want the name to be right after this text, we use only the point. If you want it to be below, then you have to use print ln. So based on how you want it. So here too we can have this over here. Then here too you can have this over here. Okay. So now we can run again. Okay, so the name Godwin Sean. Staff ID, say 2012. Okay, and hours work, can say 5. Okay, so that's the calculations in the value. So salary information, so employee name is national, staff ID is this, hours are entered, hourly rate, tax, and the calculated values. Okay, so 8 times 5, which is 40, and the tax is 10 over 100 times 40, which is 4. Then the gross salary will be 40 minus 4, which will be 36. The net salary is 36. Okay, so that's it for our arithmetic example and our string example. So this example demonstrates that before you get input from the user, you have to declare the variable name to reserve a space on the memory, just like we did over here. So here we declare the variables we need to store the information inside. So based on the data type of information we're storing, and the data type for those variables. So name is string, ID is also string, because some IDs may have some letters inside. That's why we declare our ID to be string. Then the hours we get from the user is supposed to be double, because there may be point something. Then gross salary, there will also be decimal. And tax, there may also be decimal. Let's select them, they also declare it as a double. Okay, now to get the input from the user, you need to import the java.util.scanner class. So you need this line of code over here in your class. Now once you've done that, you need to declare the object for that scanner. So the object, the name of the object, you decide the name you want to give it to it. So I've decided to use the name input. Okay, then we have it. Then every object you create, you use the new keyword. So the class name, the object name, then equal to the new keyword, then the same class name you have here. Now some classes doesn't have anything inside. Some classes has. For the scanner class, it has this as its input or argument or constructor. So you have system.in, you have to pass it over here like the way it's written here. So this create object of your scanner class. So based on the type of information you are going to store on the memory and the method you need to call on this object. If the variable name where you are going to store the information is a string, then it's supposed to be input dot the next line. Okay. Then if it is double dot next double, if it is a string dot next line. Once we've gotten all the input from the user, then you can do the calculation. Now we declare our hourly rate as a constant, our task rate also as a constant. In a good programming, the constant we need to use capital letters. Okay, so since I want you to start, since this is the beginning, the earlier you start, the easier it will be for you. So let's use the constant. Let's use capital letters for them, so that you get used to it. So hourly rate, the tax rate too. So for constant, advise that you use capital for the constant. Okay. So now I can change here. So here, the variable name is now hourly rate. And remember that variable names are case sensitive. So you can see that when I change the capital letters, it's complaining for the lower case. So variable names in Java are case sensitive. So here is tax rate. Okay. So I'm supposed to teach you the right thing. Even though you have liberty to do certain things, you have to learn the ethical way of doing programming from the early stage. So here it is hourly rate. Okay. So remember, it's advisable to write a constant in capital letters, even though you have the liberty to choose how you write it. But you need to start the good programming ethics so that you get used to it. When you get to the company, it will be easier for you. And when you write a good code, people will admire you and like you in the company. So you need to start from now. Okay, so that's it. So now let's continue and see if there is something we need to talk about before the class ends. Okay, so this is just a sample code which is similar to what I have done. So here, in this example, it declared the constant as global variables. So here, global variables or local variable, it doesn't matter. They all do the same thing. Okay, so this example demonstrates the global variable I've also explained in the video as well. So you need to import your java.title class, which is over here. Then you declare your variable names over here. Yeah, these are the names stated over here. This is the output. Then in the scanner object, it name it input device. So you too can choose your own name. So you output something to the user, then you get the value from the user. So based on where you are storing your data from the user and the method you call, if the variable name is string, you call the next line. If it is double, you have to call next double. So the method you call on your scanner object is based on where you are saving your value. So here, since our hours is double, we have to call the next double on that object. So the object dot then the appropriate method you call based on where you are storing your inputs. So if your input is of the type double, you need to call next double. If it's of the type string, you need to call dot next line or dot next. And once you've done the calculation, then you can just do your. So in this example, the tax rate, it didn't do the calculation and put the value. So it's 10 as a tax rate. So you need to divide it by 100. So it's going to be 10 over 100. So that will be your tax rate. Then you use it to calculate, to multiply your gross salary. Then you can get your tax and your net salary. And the rest is just the displaying of the information which we've done. Okay. So I think that is it for the week. So there is an assignment you need to work on. Assignment number 1 says write a program that asks a user to enter the radius of a circle. So you write system.out, please enter the radius of the circle. And once you say that, you need to get the radius from the user. And your program should calculate the circumference and area of the circle and display the result. So you calculate the circumference and the area, then you display the result on the screen. Then assignment 2. Write a program that converts a degree Celsius temperature into a Fahrenheit. Your program should ask the user to enter the degree temperature and the Fahrenheit temperature is displayed. So you take the degree temperature, you do the calculation and display the Fahrenheit value of your degree temperature. So an example, this is just a display to tell what the program is about. Then you ask the user to enter the degree temperature. Now once the user enters it, you use this formula to do the calculation for the Fahrenheit. And once you've done the calculation, then you output the results on the screen. Okay, so thank you very much for following this course. So if you have any question, you know where to contact me. When you go to the front page of this course, there is chat with an instructor. So when you click on chat with an instructor, there will be a chat box that you can send me a message. If you are running an error, you can take a screenshot of your error code in the message, the error message, so that I can check and figure out where you are doing the error, where the error is coming from. Then I can reply you and try to help you to fix that error. Okay, so enjoy the rest of the day and hope to see you next week. And try to do the assignment. If you have any challenge, you let me know by sending me a chat message. Okay, bye for now.